Okay, so I have the word, right? Thank you very much, Esther, for putting together this encounter across disciplines, across knowledges in our university. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here together with two people who mean a great lot to me, whose paths I have crossed and have only gained by getting to know them and work with them for a long time. Kaha first and Simone afterwards, and then seeing the two of them get so close with each other professionally that, yet again, it was a great satisfaction for me. I would only like to add one thing before we give the floor to Kaha, because she gets the word first, which is where it belongs. I would only like to emphasize how good a writer can be with titles. The title of her first collection of stories is Fra Intendimenti. And that is, the getting together, meeting, encountering, crisscrossing, putting cultures together. We're not really talking only about Italian colonialism here. We're talking about messing up things, because the world in which we live is a mess. And in order to understand it, we get to get out of pre-ordered structures. The other more recent book is La disfavola degli elefanti. It's a challenge for translation on the spot into English. La disfavola è troppo bello, però. And of course, La quarta via. And I do hope that you had a chance to spend half an hour and have a look at this documentary, which was produced with Simone. And so that I don't waste more time later, let me also say that Simone we met in Trento, where he graduated, and had an idea of doing a doctoral program with us, and was certainly accepted. But then he had a much better idea of going to Warwick, and via Warwick go to Stony Brook, USA. So congratulations for your career, Simone, a career that probably, given the fact that on your webpage we can read labels such as film studies, migration literatures, post-colonial theory, gender studies, diaspora studies, you could have never have had in Italy. Because in Italy, I think that more or less I have been teaching things like these for all of my life, but always under the superior label Lingue e letterature anglo-americane e studi di genere. That was already mixing cards, right? But Simone is really an expert in what we're about to talk, and he'll get to intervene, and hopefully I'll be able to interact with both of them. But first, let us listen to Kaha and her introduction into her world of stories. Thank you, Kaha.
Giovanna. Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you for having me. I just want to introduce some motivation which brought me to realize or think about the Fourth Road, its oral version, which proceeds on which the documentary is taken from. In 1991, my home city, Mogadishu, was totally destroyed. Militias and armed gangs entered into the city to overthrow the dictator. We all, many Somalis like me, we were happy. They succeeded, and we were all happy that they destroyed they dethroned the dictator. But we also, what can I say? At the same time, we realized that they destroyed everything, every single structure, all the institutions, and the state disappeared. I'm not saying that this is the first time that in Somalia happened something like that, but it was a turning point moment, because from that moment, the trust of people who belonged to different clans had strongly decreased, because these gangs, these militias, when they entered to the city, we realized too that they were belonging to the same clan, and they kicked out everybody who didn't belong to their clan. So the trust between people with different clans, people belonging with different clans decreased completely, strongly. Another thing is that the other main clans in Somalia, they adapted that kind of behavior. And that also changed how the Somali people inhabited in their territory. And the clan sadly became the only thing regarded. Fortunately, I wasn't there when that things were happening in Somalia. I was in Italy, safe. I was safe in Italy, and what I found out was something that I never suspected of me, that I was, which was that I was put in the same pot of the dictator. And it didn't matter if my father was oppositor of the dictator and he was prisoner of 6 years of isolation by the dictator. Didn't matter to that I hated that dictatorship. As I said, the only thing regarded was which clan you belonged to. Thousands of people had to flee from their homes. Thousands of people died just because they belonged to the wrong clan. That things, I was very shocked about what was happening that moment. And I was in silence for years. I didn't say anything for years. And then I reacted. I reacted with thinking and realizing some oral stories first, like the Fourth Road. What I did is I didn't want to leave the last words to the warlords. So I gathered some images of the city of Mogadishu. I divided them for 4 groups, and every group I gave every group, each group corresponded with an image of the city of Mogadishu in a particular historical period, and then I choose a name for this parties, and which was roads, the first road, the second road, the third road, and then I gave each road an color, suitable color, which synthesizes and symbolizes the character and the dominant spirit of that part of the city. For example, I choose green color for the most ancient part of the city, because that part of the city, because the green color is the Islam, the color of the Islam, and that part of the city was had Islamic architecture. So and then to what can I say, to brought out the complexity and to brought out the capacity that of coexistence that the Somali people had for centuries within their differences. I put these roads one next to other. So one with their different colors and different style. When I'm at the same time that while I'm saying this different stories that each road brings when I was telling. And then another thing, another goal that I want to highlight in this oral story was and still is that the first three roads they have a common ground, which is none of them destroyed previous road when it comes to change. And that was the novelty of the fourth road, which destroyed everything which comes before it. Going back to the structure of the oral story, to move from one road to another road, I use some songs, pictures, or even written stories. To jump from the second, for example, to jump from the second road to the third road, I used an unwritten story that the title is Granddad Why and the Color of the Allies, which you can find in the website of the conference, and I hope that you already read it. That story covers an arc of time from 50s to 70s and beyond. And this is it deals with colonialism, colonials, and also gender issues. And this is the story that this story tells when my grandfather decided to send his daughters to the Italian school, and he fought against, for this decision, he fought against the Italian administration, colonial administration, and against Somali elders too. Both of them didn't want that the girls went to the Italian school. But at the end, my grandfather won twice. He won in the short times because his daughters went to the Italian school, and he wants to in the long term because that girls, they became women. And they not only that his daughters, but even other the daughters of men and women who agreed with the decision of my grandfather in that moment. All that girls, they became women, and in the 70s they joined the ruling class of the 70s. Now we are on the third road, the socialism road, which has the red color and which unfortunately, sadly, turned into a dictatorship. But what I want to highlight is that class, ruling class, didn't destroy what comes before the previous road, but just propose different perspective and ideology respect the colonial one. In fact, they made compulsory the school for all the girls and all the boys, differently differently what the colonial period. I mean, they changed in compulsory what in the colonial period was only courtesy. And this is how, even if you look at the architecture of the city in the 70s, instead of destroying the previous part of the city, the ruling class of the 70s, they built another center and another new center with different perspective, because they dotted, how can I say, they dotted this new center the statues of the heroes of the independence and against the colonialism. So it is a way from it is way that the third road replied with the second road. The novelty of the fourth road was and is that it destroyed everything comes before it and introduced in Somalia and to introduce the chaos and the period of the era of the lawlessness. So what can I say? As I didn't want to leave the last words to the warlords, I brought this oral story everywhere in Italy. I was invited in 2008. I was invited to ISOLA, International Society of Oral Literature, and there I met some African scholars who invited me in Africa to present it in Africa. And I went there where the oral stories are at home. And then I went, and then I met Simone, ecco, here we are. And then I met Simone, who proposed me to make a documentary based upon my oral story, and I was very happy about that, because when you think or realize or compose an oral story, you hope that another person propose to you or ask you or retell this story in another way with his or her instruments and lens. And that's what Simone proposed to be. We started work on it in 2009, and when we finished, we enclosed with it a book of thoughts of some Somali and Italian scholars to maintain also the plurality. What else can I say of this? I'm going to the conclusion. The heart of this oral story, and I think even the heart of the documentary, is the memory. The documentary Simone will soon tell us in depth. The heart of the oral story is the memory. The memory, for me, is something important to keep for many reasons, because the memory, in a critical way, of course, for many reasons, because the memory as a compass to avoid the wrong roads, for example, or to keep going to the right roads, or compass to distinguish, that it helps to distinguish the wrong roads from the right roads. The memory for me is, and we all know, it's also a battlefield for many reasons. For example, the warlords, or even the colonialists or the neo-colonialists, they all tried, and still they continue to try to manipulate the memory, perhaps because they know that the memory is an important source for the identity or for the confidence or of the hope. And I believe to hope. need, and I need, and I hope, and I believe that if we, as a human being, had the capacity to coexist with respect and tolerance, then we can have in the future. And if we didn't, and even there, I need and I want to hope that we will found it. Now we are on the last road, the fifth road, which is the road of the hope. This road, we know, this road is always in working in progress. So what can I say? Let's start to work and let's start to walk on the hope, the fifth road. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We certainly need to keep hoping and keep moving away from violence and injustice. And you're showing the way. And I will give the floor to Simone to continue enlightening us on your encounter and the fourth road.
Thank you so much, Giovanna, and thank you so much, Esther, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear Kaha speak and talking about La Quarta Via. I just would like to give my side of the story to kind of complete, what Kaha said about our meeting. And, I want to start from my personal story, not because I'm an egocentric, but also because I would like to give you a kind of trajectory of my, of the ways in which I've approached the theme of post-colonial Italian cultures and how meeting with Kaha has changed the ways in which I approach literature or my work as an academic. So I studied in Trento. I studied with Giovanna, and thanks to Giovanna, I have not only learned how to write in English, which was actually very, useful, but also she introduced me to some important critical theory and texts, such as the works, by Bell Hooks, Donna Haraway, Toni Morrison, etc. And I found it very useful, this critical theory, to understand the reality around me. It was incredibly useful, especially critical race theory, to understand Italy at that time. I come from Brescia, which is a city where there is a large immigrant population, and so I find it very interesting, but also that there was not much was done about to use this critical theory in order to understand, in order to approach and to read these texts about the literature of migration. When we started, there was not much was done about these texts, although there were actually plenty of very interesting works by immigrants in Italian, narrating, our world, but from a slightly different perspective. And also, many Italians were still unaware of the colonial past. When in schools, I didn't study Italian colonialism. I studied Italian colonialism when I actually was writing my PhD proposal for work. And so, thanks to Giovanna, I talked to Giovanna and I told her about my proposal for a PhD in Italian post-colonial literature. And she introduced me to Kaha, and meeting Kaha for me was an epiphany, because on the one hand, she was incredibly able and skilled to think in metaphorical and symbolic ways, the story of Somalia. No, she was able to translate, her way to look at this very complex history. If we think about Somalia from, let's say, the end of colonialism up to present day, is probably the country in the world that has seen some very incredibly dramatic changes, which I hope to highlight in my presentation. But also she made me, face a challenge. I was, I had all these tools, which I found useful for me, at least, to understand the Italian reality. I love to read and write about literature. I wrote about Ballard, Palahniuk, Bret Easton Ellis, etc., etc. However, when by collaborating with Kaha, talking about her work and the work by other writers of Somali origins, I kind of thought that I needed to change the way the activity of literary criticism was conceived, which is structured around a colonial model of knowledge production, where you have the critic, usually a white critic, talking about the work by African writers, which is, of course, a way to perhaps promote and make this work, and available, more accessible, etc. Yet at the same time, I found it very, very limiting. Also because I knew much, I always find that I wanted to make this dialogue that that Kaha and I were having more widely accessible, and so we decided to make this movie. Kaha conceived La Quarta Via as an oral story. There is a reason why this story was oral, because it is based on the Somali oral tradition. Somali language was written with a codified alphabet only since 1974, and so the choice to create an oral story was a way also to connect to a tradition. And making a documentary was a way to make this incredible narration from which I've learned so much about the history of Somalia and about my own country, and the connected story between Somalia and Italy, more widely available. Because indeed, La Quarta Via is a personal story, but is also a collective story of Somalia, but it's also a collective story because it was created collectively by a group of people that Kaha, thanks to Kaha and to her way of intending storytelling as a participatory activity, we were able to do. And in fact, thanks to Kaha, we were able to create a narrative community, that after La Quarta Via made another documentary, and now we are actually working on a third documentary. And it all started from Kaha's inclusive and participatory idea of narration. So, why was it so important to collaborate? I just would like to perhaps end up this idea of collaboration as key for my work, because I conceive my work as an academic, as a collaborative work. After collaborating with Kaha, and thanks to the collaboration with Kaha, I've also collaborated with Shirin Ramzan Fazel, Ribka Sibatu, and other writers. This is a way to make, for me at least, more accessible certain voices inside the academia, where very often was conceived is a very white environment, often and very, it was, the division into department, of course, there's not only, the national, the division has the role of creating somehow national consciousness, etc. While what we were interested in was thinking about transnationally. So to think about Italy in connection with other places, in particular Africa, but also I was a migrant myself. I couldn't probably do my research in Italy, and I went to the UK and then to the US. So I had this kind of external perspective on Italy, and another way why I found the collaboration with Kaha and La Quarta Via very useful as a theoretical model to think about contemporary Italy is that we often conceive theory, essays as divided or separated from artworks. No, instead, no. Kaha's ways of thinking about Somali history, but also the ways in which migration literature is often hybridized with, it's very difficult to define. It's not, what is La Quarta Via? It's an essay, it's an autobiographically inspired narration. Is it poetry? Is it really hard to define? Therefore, I think that, we have to really unthink the division between, literature, cinema, documentary, essays, etc., when we approach works like that. And precisely that kind of hybrid form of La Quarta Via allowed us to, to better express a story that, as Kaha rightly, told me since the very beginning, cannot be written. This is an embodied story. It's a story that is, that is written on her flesh, blood, on her skin, on our interaction, etc. So it needed to be really embodied. And also, we wanted to make a story that was more widely available for, to a wider audience. We wanted that Italians to know about the colonial history. We wanted them to know the centrality of this experience to understand our contemporaneity, because we lived during the Berlusconi time. There were horrible laws that started or were further implemented against migrants and against explicitly racist laws. And so it was a way for us to counter these kind of narrations and to propose also a different ways of narrating immigration. Above all, we wanted Kaha to speak, to have rather than being narrated or grouped into this kind of abstract immigrant groups or terms or terminologies. So what are some of the most interesting features of the documentary, I think? So I think it's very interesting, or at least I found it very interesting because of the ways in which the documentary describes temporality and spatiality, so the geography and time. First of all, because it is, the past and the present coexist in this movie, no? Kaha's life today, of course, has been shaped. She's in Italy because of a reason. she has been shaped by previous encounters that made us who we are. No? So it's very interesting to see that in La Quarta Via, the present is a present where, present and past coexist. And it is a reiteration of history that, as Kaha said before, memory is a battlefield, no? It is a way, Kaha talking about Somalia, next to some historical landmarks of Pavia, is a way to re-narrate that story, to give a different meaning to those places, but also is a way also to enter a debate about what to do with these historical symbols. No, I'm sure you're all aware about the recent protests of the Black Lives Matter, where people started to contest certain symbols that of course represent a history of exploitation, oppression, and slavery, etc. I think Kaha in La Quarta Via does something that is very similar. No, she talks about her city, Mogadishu, but she talks about this city in Pavia because there are these stories are so connected, and there are so many symbols of colonialism, racism in her city that she has been able to deal with, in her life, in her work, etc. But also there are some, these presences are also ghostly presences. No, we ended the movie with the projection of some images of Somalia on a wall. No, and it's kind of interesting to see these presences of Mogadishu haunting haunting Kaha's affective geography, I think. Another important point, which of course there are, what we did in our movie, it's not different from what is going on also in other parts of Italy. I think about the experience of Resistenza in Cirenaica in Bologna, where they're actually renaming some streets and changing the names of colonizers into names of people who, partisans who fought against Italian fascism. I think about Viva Menelicchi, which is a similar experience in Palermo, but there are different and very interesting grassroots demonstration against these symbols. But also there is another dimension that I find very interesting, and is a linguistic dimension. Kaha is, among Somali writers living in Italy, the only writer who was scholarized in Somali. So she's a Somali speaker, she can write Somali, so it's very interesting, I think, the ways in which Somali enters into her discourse, enters in La Quarta Via, or can be found in the expressions that are usually translated inside the text, where she talks about, where she includes these linguistic terms in her Italian text. This is not exoticism, no? It's a kind of an exercise that we, as readers, need to make in order to read our text. No, we need to kind of, kind of learn a new language, which is not a new language only linguistically, but is also a new way, a multilingual way, a translingual way of expressing a reality, which is of course part of our everyday life and experience. But also one last point that I would like to make before perhaps having this dialogue with Giovanna, is about the idea of belonging. No, there is a multiple belonging expressed in La Quarta Via, but also in the collection of short stories Fraintendimenti. No. And is a way of intending belonging that keeps on changing, that varies, that is very, inclusive, transnational, and really constitutes a broader kind of, a very, an idea of community that really transpasses, the many borders and boundaries that we find in our world. And I'm happy to be part of this community. And I leave the floor to Giovanna, but I think you're muted.
Sorry, I had lost the screen. Thank you so much, Simone, especially for emphasizing the value of the encounter, the value of the three of us with all of our differences, grand differences, interrupting each other, putting together our fragments and seeking another language, because that's what life is all about. We don't come into the world with one language and sit comfortably on that language, on that culture for the rest of our life, because that is like seeking conflict. So the idea of encounter from an epistemological point of view, if you want, even from a philosophical point of view, must be central. It is central to that coexistence that Kaha invoked. And it is the only thing that can fuel the hope that she donated to us. And thank you for emphasizing that we always need, through the encounter, to be willing to develop another language, which may not be a language that is somewhere codified out there. We could put it otherwise. We could say that we should all be willing to accept living in translation, which is living with imperfections, because we know that translation is never perfect, and also that translation is always temporary. And while I was listening to you, I was trying to dig out this quote from Arundhati Roy. Again, you know, I'm very undisciplined in my discipline. From American literature, here we are talking about Somalia and Italy, and now I'm asking you to go to India. I'm asking you to go to India. Arundhati Roy's recent collection of essays, Azadi, Freedom, Fascism, Fiction. She reminds us that about 780 languages are spoken in India, 22 of which only are formally recognized, while only Hindi and English are designated the official languages of the nation. So this is clearly a good starting point for challenging the idea, you know, the traditional idea, one religion, one language, one nation. That very comfortable image, which is at the basis of all nationalisms. Her novel, she says, the second most famous one, The Ministry, she says it's written in English, but it is imagined in several languages. And not only it was imagined in several languages, but now it's been already translated in 48 languages. So you know what to do with that idea of identity that is at the foundation of national identity and, of course, of colonialisms of various kinds. Well, she says how central, and I would like to quote her to honor Kaha's presence with us today. She says how central the novel storytelling is to deal with the social, political, cultural problems of everyday lives. It is not a decoration. Literature becomes the only place that gives total freedom. Within a novel, you can be incredibly complicated. Within a novel or a story or a poem, you can move through worlds, languages, societies, communities, politics. And she insists in the conclusion of one of her essays to say that a novel is freedom with responsibility. And I would really like to insist on, the idea of freedom with responsibility, which is what seems to me we're pursuing here. I was actually looking for responsibility when the three of us somehow some years ago came together, because I was self-conscious of the fact that I was constantly teaching race critical theories, as Simone recalled, the history of slavery in the United States, African Caribbean literatures in Italy. And I was always uncomfortable because I did not want to be the informer. I did not want to transport information about their racism, their colonialism into our own context. And I was really looking for something on which this knowledge, this information could stick. I was looking for a glue, and Kaha provided the glue. And the work that Simone went off doing after writing his thesis on Palahniuk provided the glue that is, if you allow me to explain why I invited you to read that chapter in Post-Colonial Thinking by Leela Gandhi, the glue that to me makes sense in embracing the idea of the post-colonial still today. Let me see if I can share a couple of slides, just because you must be tired of just voices for a moment. And I won't go on for much long, and then we'll open discussion. But if it's okay with you, unless you have specific questions and you want me to shut up immediately, I would only justify the other reading that we asked you to consider. I hear only silence. I hope you haven't fallen asleep, or I hope you're not too shy. Okay, I'll take about 10 minutes, okay? And if I take longer, please stop me, because I don't want to kill discussion. You should see now the right PowerPoint entitled Colonialism. Okay, because for a moment I had the other one that I digged out, because Arundhati Roy was not in the cards, but it really came to my mind in listening to Kaha and Simone. And very briefly, when you say post-colonial studies, you think about an academic discipline, and probably nowadays, 2020, you also think that it is a little bit passé. because there's already been a generation of scholars that have made a little career on post-colonial studies. And now we're kind of seeking something new, because a little bit that's how the academy operates, by moving from fashion into another fashion. There isn't much to say about this kind of field. It's been codified in so many ways. It already is between the covers of textbooks. But I don't want to forget Edward Said's Orientalism, because it came before the academic codification of postcolonial studies, and because it really represented a cultural turn, a cultural shift. While I think that what is considered the #1 milestone, The Empire Writes Back, is a typically academic product that only marks the academic turn, i.e. the introduction of postcolonial studies into some academies, certainly not so quickly into the Italian academy. What is it basically, and how has it been simplified, and how has it been reduced? Basically to the study of what European empires have done around the world, of which they kind of owned 85% in various forms up to World War I, you know, protectorates, colonies, dominions, whatever, commonwealths. You can go on and on to see all the declinations of various forms of colonizations. And the number of voices is really large. But I would say that together with Edward Said, it is almost impossible to think about postcolonial studies without the help of Gayatri Spivak, without Homi Bhabha, without writers such as Bucci Mecchetti, Chinua Achebe, Frantz Fanon, if you want to go back in time, but and of course Salman Rushdie, who also paid with his life. Simplifications are always bad, because simplifications basically are the reduction of knowing to a technical thing, to a techne. The reduction of the episteme to techne. And that's always risky and dangerous. A bunch of concepts, right? If you know what hybrid means, if you know the binary center periphery, then you know postcolonial studies. If you're in literature, if you know Commonwealth literatures, you must know the postcolonial. Well, embracing Leela Gandhi's idea for me means jumping out of postcolonial theory into postcolonial thinking, which is that which gives us the tool to manage our own globalization in terms of planetarity, if you wish, in more democratic terms. It enables us to inhabit borderlands, to still engage and embrace creolization, which is a process that we need to keep moving forward. It's not United Colors of Benetton, it's not we are becoming all whites, which is of course the risk of the techne reduction. But it is really trying to conceive of ourselves, all of us, as being here and there at the same time, which has always been kind of the standard definition of the Caribbean, an area of my interest. In other words, it comes down to emphasizing the exercise of critical thinking, critical humanistic interrogation, as the lead for our understanding of power forces and political implications of any knowledge that we produce as scholars, any knowledge that we disseminate as scholars, so that our knowing contributes to decolonizing our minds and cultures. It was Foucault who defined critique as questioning governing values from the point of view of the present. So it's this questioning, right? Questioning values from the point of view of the present. It is very important, and I think there where in La Quarta Via, Kaha says, I'm not Italian Somali, I'm not Somali Italian, I'm Kaha. I'm much more than that. Don't reduce me to that, hyphen that brings two countries together. That's precisely exercising critical thinking. The way Robert Young, for example, has defined it, and it means, I will just let you go quickly through this quotation, but what I want to emphasize here is it means to engage knowledges and histories that come to count, that displace the center, not that remain at the margins. It's the center that must change in the light of that relationship. It's a preoccupation, of course, with subaltern classes, with the oppressed, with minorities in any society, the preoccupation with concerns of those who live or come from elsewhere that constitutes the basis of this kind of post-colonial thinking and politics that probably makes it live on. And Gandhi, in her book, re-edited in 2019, proposes post-colonial thinking as a contemporary philosophy for a life that is no longer injured and that is no longer injurious, i.e., a life that is non-violent, which does not mean simply a life in which violence is absent, but a life in which non-violence is engaged actively, is made every day. And what does it take to make it? Well, she spells out 7 steps. The first idea is assemblage. And isn't La Quarta Via a magnificent example of assemblage? All those roads, layers, not really encountering each other, but they stay there because memory is that which empowers the present. Yes, attending injury and exit. Exit is important. Exit is important. Just a minute ago, I said one of my fields of inquiry being Caribbean literature, and one of the most standard definitions of the Caribbean is that it is here and there. What does that mean? It means that there are more diasporic Caribbean people around the world than Caribbean people in the Caribbean as we are speaking. So the Caribbean is, the largest Caribbean city in the world is in New York. It's not Jamaican city in the world is in New York. It's not Kingston, Jamaica. And that consciousness of interconnections, that breaking down of spatiality and temporality to which Simone so rightly was referring, is at the center of this contemporary philosophy, as Lila proposes, that is post-colonial thinking, based on the idea of renunciation, which is a Buddhist idea. And what does it mean? It's not contempt for those who oppress you if you're suffering. It's not running away, but it is first of all a running away from yourself so that you actually get more attached to the others. This is a very radical, extreme proposal that Lila Gandhi makes us face in conclusion to her essay. Her essay invites us to live in a minor key, all of us to become less as a good value, think about progress, think about modernity, the way we have conceived of it as always getting more, as always becoming more. This is a total upside down idea about leading our lives. Refusing to comply with the dominant status quo means, first of all, becoming minor, becoming less. And we have good reasons to question modernity. We have very good reasons to question modernity within the context of this seminar, because modernity comes with a great contradiction. Colonialism and decolonialization looks at the empires of modernity. You're here to study colonialism within modernity. And modernity is, yes, the beginning of democracy. Yes, the beginning of a kind of thinking that is no longer totalitarian, but it is at the same time the beginning of slavery, imperialism, possessions of people all around the world and of their lands. So we have to tackle this contradiction, which is, so emblematic. And now for the first and only time, I will bring myself home within American culture, as in culture of the United States. It is emblematically enshrined within the Constitution of the United States in its first draft, right after the Declaration of Independence, where you proclaim, freedom, justice, equality, all those wonderful things that define modernity. And at the same time, you declare slavery to be legal. So Leela Gandhi basically tells us that embracing post-colonial thinking today means exiting from both the oppressor and the oppressed, exiting from that binary. And yes, she even invokes anarchism, but I'm sure you have read it and you don't want to hear my summary about it. But consider this possibility for making this field of knowledge, which is disobedient, disrupting, not very coherent, because it's an assemblage. It's a little bit of a makeshift, put together, every time you put together different things incongruently, because you need to do a certain work. And you kind of, draw meanings from everywhere, because you need to draw meanings from all four roads in Mogadishu in order to envision that mythical fifth liberatory road, that is the road of hope, of exiting, of getting out through renunciation, of getting out of this system of power and embracing an activist nonviolence, which means civil disobedience, which means exactly embracing that freedom with responsibility that Arundhati Roy is invoking. That in order to make it happen, of course, we can only first imagine it. So imagination becomes a central part of political action. And I think I'm going to stop here, because maybe we can interact a little bit. Otherwise, this becomes really far too boring. I hope we made some sense.
just step in and thanks all of you. Thank you so much for the way the three threads have come together, and to me they make perfectly sense. And I noted down a lot of comments and questions, but I think we should leave the priority to students. So maybe you can switch on your camera unless you have kind of any technical problem or connection problem, so that we see faces. And please feel free to step in with questions, comments, critiques, ideas. We always need someone who breaks the ice.
Yes.
I can do this, maybe.
Please.
I would like to thank all of you really for this very interesting presentation and discussion. And I wanted just to make a brief comment about the Fourth Road. I had the pleasure to watch the documentary film, and I think it's very interesting also from a historical point of view. I noted that you use for your documentary also historical sources. There's an extract of a newsreel or a documentary film of 1960s on the way Italy represents its new colonial attitude towards Somali. So it's a very telling example of how this political narrative of how Italy tries to present itself as a I would say a civilian power. I would like. So I have really a brief question about curiosity about these sources. Where does it come from? And if you can say something more about the context or about the audiovisual languages you use for your documentary. Many thanks again.
Yeah, so I can go first, but if Kaha has anything to add, I just I just stop and so we can have you can have both perspectives. Well, that was Cinegiornale of the 1960s, and it was. I found it online, and then it was it's always very hard and to find the actual rights to insert it in the documentary, and it was quite interesting to see how in this movie we only see animals. There are no Somalis. No, the ways in which it conceives space is the exact same ways in which space is conceived during colonialism. No, so Africa is is an empty space. It is a space where the European colonizers can actually change as they please. No. And then you actually see the Mogadishu Cathedral, no, which is a huge building. Was actually the largest Christian cathedral in Africa, and it's enormous. No, it's gigantic. You see that, and it's kind of also interesting to see the comments of the person commenting the video. He says that that Italians civilized Africans. So it's kind of interesting to see that in the 1960s, a period that we usually associate with the economic boom, etc., there is still that kind of colonial mentality present in Italy. And in other studies that I have made, I think we should really interrogate a bit more the colonial nostalgia of Italy in the 1960s. It is still a period in which you know, Italy is the colonial imaginary, the fascist imaginary is still present, but there are also, you know, new kinds of sensitivity is emerging, and the 1960s are still a period that have not been studied much in terms of, you know, representation of race. And we wanted to create this contrast, you know, between, you know, the newsreel and a very personal story that Kaha narrates. You know, she doesn't, you know, she doesn't speak directly in the camera. No, she doesn't break the fourth wall. You know, she talks about the fourth road, but she doesn't break the fourth wall. She does not have any, you know, any official truth to say. She has a personal story to narrate. Everything is filtered through her, you know, through affect, through her personal story, you know. So that we wanted to kind of create this contrast.
Thank you, Simone.
Can I say few words on this subject? In the documentary, we said that this huge cathedral is next to the one of most important mosque in Mogadishu, and we left there. We didn't destroy it, and this, I think that this is important for the capacity of Somali people that they had to live with the differences. Now the cathedral is destroyed, and you have to know that Somalia, the 99% of people were Muslim, and they were some kind of Muslim, not the kind of that we are now. So we had here in Pavia, we had difficult to have a mosque, because they told here in Italy, they said that if you create a mosque, it will be against the Christian religions or something like that. But in Somalia, the cathedral was left there. No one touched the cathedral and the Christian people. And this, I think that this is the great civilization and it I don't know, it underlines the character of the Somali people that I afraid sadly they will lose this kind of character, this kind of behavior. I don't know if I explain myself. Thank you.
Any more question? Yeah.
Yes, I have a question if I can.
Please.
First, I would like to share a thought that I have watching the documentary, and in particular, this last part we were talking about the part about the Cinegiornale and the relation that there was on how Italians and, for example, Italian media and government still saw the situation in Somalia, even if it was not considered to be colonial period. They were still saying that Italians were helping and were giving resources to Somalia. And there is a sentence in particular that's really interesting. I will try to translate it. They said something like, we as Italians feel we gave so much, but we didn't receive the same amount back. And so I think what I wanted to say about this is that even if the idea of colonization is probably going forward and we are trying to overcome it somehow, probably in the society in general, this idea is still there, it's just changing shape. Maybe is more invisible to a less trained eye to see social phenomenon. Maybe we are not seeing colonization, but at the same time, the same phenomenon are still present. As, for example, it's not only in post-colonial studies, but also in gender studies, in queer studies. Maybe we are seeing the same, the same process, that the same discrimination is happening, even if it's less visible, even if it's not called in the same with the same name. So at the end of this, my question is, how can we change the narrative in order to finally overcome these processes and to accept that what we are living is still somehow maybe called, we should call it colonialism, or we should call it discrimination, or the idea of the ethnocentric white man at the center of the world. I don't know if it was a clear question.
Simone, I think you are muted.
Thank you for your question. I believe that, colonialism is definitely an historical process that had a huge legacy. And we can see this legacy, of course, now. We can see it both in the colonized country and in the colonizer country. I think the first legacy that we can see, or something that definitely was very present in the colonies, and there is a great article by Olindo De Napoli about this process, is that, of course, Italians wanted to bring a civilization in the colonies, but as soon as they got into the colonies, they had to create also some laws to regulate the colonies and to justify the fact that, de facto, there was an apartheid, that white people had more rights than Africans. And so, there is this kind of this ambiguity that is present in the colonial discourse that we can recognize in our societies. If we have certain agreements, international agreements about, for example, rescuing, people at sea, if we have agreements, about respecting human rights, etc. So why is there an exception when it comes to, rescuing migrants, when it comes to preserving the rights of refugees, of minors, etc. So there is this kind of ambiguity that is still present. And then there is also a problem of, of representation. That there is, I don't think there is a straightforward line connecting the colonial period to today. Many things have happened in between, and there are a lot of, very different influences, including from the United States. However, there are still, deeply, some, basically racism is deeply ingrained in the constitution of the European national identities. If you think about Italy, Italians weren't quite white before the colonial experience. That's why colonialism was constitutive of, creating Italians as they are now, as white, as more or less homogeneous, etc. So I think, it's so difficult to talk about colonialism, because we really need to rethink or unthink the ways in which we conceive national belonging.
May I just one little thing, because I really want to thank Anna for her question. It's crucial. How do we change the narrative? And listening to you, Anna, made me go back with my memory to that part of the documentary in which Kaha, which of course uses many genres, and Simone as the film director uses many genres to tell us the story. So that is a narrative that is already, can we say, contaminated? That is made of many fragments, that is not lead.
Giovanna, excuse me, I muted you by mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, I will take it personally.
No. It's just technology. I'm so sorry.
Oops. You see, my dogs are protesting. Okay. I was thanking Anna. I don't know when I was muted. In any case, I was thanking Anna for her crucial fundamental question about, how do we break the dominant narrative? And I think that La Quarta Via, which we have shared with you today, is a very good example. Simone emphasized its need to be a narrative made of multiple genres. Kaha is not just telling her story. Kaha is putting on a gown and showing us how her body can be modified when it is wrapped differently. Kaha is drawing on that piece of paper all the roads. We have the interruption of these obnoxious documentaries that really make us touch intimately the violence of white supremacy in our own country. And we have Kaha chanting in front of a Catholic church in Pavia, a music that in our infinite ignorance as Italians, we do not associate exactly with Gregorian chanting. And that is a gendered chant. That is gendered. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about it, Kaha? May I ask you to enlighten us more about your grandmother's song?
A special kind of poetry which only the woman can compose and can how can I say poetry, and that kind of poetry the women my grandmother she composed that poem and which is an important poem of the period of the independence of Somalia. At that point, she composed it in 1954, I think, because we had a little civil war before before we had the coup d'etat of the military. And this moment, she talking with us, she's encouraging the Somali people to leave apart their particular interests. So she stands like a woman who talks not only with her family or her clan, but to all the nation. That is the importance of this poem. And it wasn't because this kind of poem, normally they how can I say, they limited in the private ground in the, but she ha rotto il confine, she how can I say, she broke the limit, and she talks with all the nation. And for that reason, for that, it becomes a famous poem. Another thing that we prefer to, it's a political poem, that one. And we proposed it in front of one of the most important churches in Pavia. So it was change because it's a poetry of women poetry who becomes national poetry, and then we propose in front of the church, which it seems that it had nothing has to do with the church, but it has to do for me, I prefer to talk about laicity in front of the religion worship.
Anyone else who would like to? So maybe I can ask, I wanted to ask a few questions, but the first one that came to my mind, and this is for the three of you, I was wondering about the let's say the life and circulation of the documentary, how it has been received in your opinion by different sets of publics. And what do you think it is that attracted the attention, but also what you would have liked to be noted and maybe has failed to be noted by the publics, and thinking also of the different publics of the different people that I think have seen the documentary. So how it has been received, what has been noted, and what has slipped through the attention of people. I'm thinking of students or any other audience.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Well, we were really surprised and pleased by the interest that our documentary raised. And really, we presented the documentary in different places for different audiences and in different parts of the world, and we kept learning from it. It was great to have this kind of interaction. At least, personally speaking, I found it. We couldn't make many presentations together, unfortunately, Kaha and I, but it was amazing when we did. But personally, I found it very fruitful for my research, to rethink certain parts of my own research. The documentary was actually used in different universities and in different courses, including war studies, sociology, European studies, women's studies. Our reception was mostly, in the academic circuit and universities, and we didn't expect this reception, this positive reception. I think partly is due to the fact that there aren't many movies that talk about colonialism, and also credit needs to be given to Kaha's structure, very, very strong and solid structure of the Fourth Road, which which is very accessible, explaining very complex concepts with a very kind of immediate, simple scheme that is easy to follow, sometimes we were also very it was sometimes very moving, especially when there were Somalis in the audience. Sometimes I remember in Seattle I presented the movie, and there were actually people in the audience. There is a large community of Somalis in Seattle, and they were moved, deeply moved by the documentary, because of course it narrates the story of a city that no longer exists the way it was. Then we had the general public. When we presented it to there were people who were really interested, and so we wanted to make to make it also accessible for them. And it was kind of surprising sometimes when which is, I believe it's a prejudice that is very present when we talk about narratives of migration. Kaha and I once presented a movie at one university, and they asked us if we wanted to make like a fictional movie. Of course this is autobiographically inspired. This movie is autobiographically inspired, but there was a work of deciding information, of putting of emphasizing certain aspects of Kaha's life, etc., that was made, and to some extent I think this is a problem of and is connected to the ways in which we think realism, or we think immigrant narratives as a kind of direct reflection of reality, rather than being the result of very complex processes of cultural mediation.
Thank you, Simone. Anyone else would like to jump in? Then I'll take the advantage. When I was watching the documentary and I was listening to Kaha, to what Kaha was saying, it took me back again to India, Indian cities, and since Giovanna mentioned India, I feel authorized to. Many of the Indian cities predated British colonialism. No, this is the case of what the British called Bombay, and then it became Mumbai, or Chennai, that became Madras, and Calcutta, who then became Kolkata. And then there is New Delhi, that stands as like similarly to Ahmedabad. That is a creation of colonialism to a large extent. So it's a city that was actually structured and developed by an external. And so what interested me as an anthropologist, and many others like me, was the kind of relations that people have today with the urban spaces. So this kind of search of a pre-colonial authenticity that you'll find in searching for a new name, building, rediscovering old forms of architecture. So I was wondering, since I'm much less familiar with Mogadishu, and I've never been there, and what is today the relation of in your experience, in your experience and through your gaze, of the urban space with the city? It's for Kaha, yes.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I made it explicit, yeah.
What's the relation with Somalis with their urban, new urban?
Yeah, what interested me in the case, in my experience with Kolkata, in this case, in Bengal, in India, was that there was a kind of popular debate about this question: should we erase the colonial past? So there were many people who were in favor of really erasing physically the symbols, the buildings, and some others who were actually trying to include the physical heritage of colonialism, but in a new Indian or Kolkatian reading. So I was curious to know, because I
know about this kind of problem. We can't have this kind of problem because we totally destroyed the history.
Destroyed everything.
Totally. And it's a very shocking way thing. So you can't believe that none of the places that I saw when I was a child, when I was a young woman, never again I will see it. And if you think, if you ask me what I'm thinking about to erase the old statues or monuments of the colonial period or not, for me, the history must be there, and we have to use the history we have to use as a compass for me to know, to even to shape our identity. If you are different, of we are, because for example now in Somalia, as the how can I say, as the civil war destroyed everything, there is many Somalis who had history connected with the they were collaborate with the colonialism, but now they manipulate it and they change. Now it doesn't exist the history, and so they manipulate the history and saying something which is not true. They are saying that they were friends with the colonialism, but they were against at the same time. We are debating on the history, but there are many people who are manipulating the history. But I think if we have the history is simply a compass that I need to know where I to go, where to go, who I am. I am in favor of the fashions or not. So if I have the history and I know what fashions did, so I can change that way of attitude of behavior. For me, the history must be where it is, and if we want, we can build on other things, but the history must be there, and we have to read, of course, the history in a plural way and in a critical way.
Thank you.
May I just add philosophically with Leela Gandhi, she forewarns us from falling into the trap of the academicized post-colonial studies that may cast a nostalgic look upon the pre-colonial condition. The same way that she also forewarns us against entertaining the trite debate whether post-colonial is also anti-colonial. Precisely because she says, let us look critically at modernity. Modernity is that contradiction. And it is within the West that you find so many instances of anti-colonialism, not only in the periphery, so-called, that help you connect and understand and build a kind of plurivocal language about these issues. Contextually, in terms of Mogadishu, but also theoretically, I think we can jump out of this impasse.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question.
I have many more, but I hope this is a kind of begin, and then we can involve Kaha and Simone again in future occasions and seminars. And unless there is a last minute question, I have to let our speakers and the students go. But I'll just ask you to join. I know that it's not the same, but if you can just join me to thank our speakers and guests virtually. Thank you so much. And tomorrow we have a second appointment, which will build on what we have heard today, because it's about how the civilizing mission worked actually through hegemonic civil society organizations and structures in India. And all of you are welcome, of course. The students will also work on a text which talks about, in a very provocative way, what women learned when men gave them advices in colonial period. And so thank you so much. Thanks to all of you, and hope to have future occasions, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.